There is nothing the Irish do more instinctively than warn a stranger about a town while also being fiercely, almost defensively proud to live there themselves. It is a national contradiction that shows up everywhere from Limerick to Dundalk, and Clonmel, County Tipperary, might currently be the purest, most complete example of it operating in the country. Search Clonmel online, and the first results you will find are not about the river walk or the mountains rising behind the town. They are about crime. And unlike a lot of small-town crime chatter that runs on rumour and old reputation, Clonmel's version has documented official substance behind it. Between 2021 and 2026, An Garda Síochána carried out a series of publicly reported operations in and around Clonmel, targeting drug distribution, illegal firearms, and money laundering connected to an organised criminal network operating across County Munster. These were not isolated local incidents. They were part of a wider, multi-year law enforcement effort against a group with operations extending beyond Clonmel itself, and the town's name appeared repeatedly in coverage of arrests, seizures, and court proceedings tied to that investigation over several years. That is a real pattern, documented through actual Garda operations rather than exaggerated local gossip, and it deserves to be treated with the seriousness it carries. Court reporting connected to these operations describes significant cash seizures, quantities of controlled drugs valued in the hundreds of thousands of euro, and firearms recovered during coordinated raids involving Garda units from outside the immediate area. A scale of operation that goes well beyond typical small-town policing and reflects the kind of cross-border, cross-county logistics that modern organised crime networks rely on. Here is where most outside coverage of a story like this stops, and where it usually gets the town wrong by stopping there. A pattern of organised crime activity being investigated and prosecuted in a place is not the same statement as that place being defined by it, and Clonmel's own recent record makes that distinction unusually clear if you keep looking past the headline. Clonmel sits on the River Suir, with the Comeragh Mountains rising to the south and the Slievenaman Range visible to the north. A genuinely handsome mid-sized Irish town with a river walk. A well-preserved medieval town centre still tracing its layout back to Norman fortifications. And one of the most active community improvement cultures of any town its size in the country. The town also carries genuine literary weight, as the birthplace of Lawrence Sterne, the 18th century author of Tristram Shandy, one of the most influential experimental novels in the English language, a fact locals mention with a quiet pride that outsiders rarely know to ask about. Sporting life runs deep too, with Clonmel serving as a stronghold of Tipperary hurling, a county that has produced multiple All-Ireland Championship teams across the decades, and the town's GAA clubs remain central to weekly community life, in a way that has very little overlap with anything reported in a Garda press release. The town was also historically home to the Bianconi horse-drawn coach network in the 19th century, one of the earliest organised public transport systems in Ireland, a piece of local pride still referenced in town branding today. That civic pride is not vague sentiment either. It is measured, judged and awarded annually. Clonmel won gold in the National Tidy Towns competition in 2024. It won gold again in 2025. Back-to-back gold medals in a competition that judges towns on litter management, landscaping, sustainability, community involvement, and overall civic upkeep, assessed by independent adjudicators who visit unannounced and score against a detailed national standard covering dozens of specific criteria, from derelict site management to biodiversity planting along public roads. Winning gold once suggests a good year and an engaged community. Winning gold twice in a row suggests something closer to sustained, structural civic investment that a single bad news cycle about organised crime, however serious, does not undo. That civic investment is not limited to hedge trimming and flower beds either. Clonmel has been the target of more than €95 million in infrastructure spending and town centre regeneration in recent years. Funding channelled into public realm improvements along Kickham Street and the South Quay area beside the river, historic building restoration, and the kind of streetscape work that turns a town centre people drive through into one people choose to walk through, including improved lighting, widened footpaths and restored Georgian shopfronts along the main commercial strip. €95 million is not a symbolic grant. It is the scale of investment that reflects a council and a community actively deciding what kind of town Clonmel is going to be, rather than passively accepting whatever headline happens to define it that year. Here is the part locals will tell you if you actually ask them, rather than just reading the crime coverage from a distance. Residents describe a town where the organised crime activity investigated by Garda is understood locally as exactly what it is: a serious law enforcement matter involving a specific network, largely invisible to daily life for the overwhelming majority of the roughly 18,000 people who actually live in Clonmel and go about entirely ordinary days there. The same town that appeared in Garda operation reports is also, in the words of residents who have lived there for decades, one of the more genuinely pleasant mid-sized towns in the southeast to actually raise a family in, with a strong sense of community, an active sporting and cultural life built around GAA, rugby, and a busy art scene centred on facilities like the South Tipperary Arts Centre, and a riverwalk that locals use daily in a way that visitors from bigger cities often comment on with something close to envy. Local parkrun events along the river regularly draw hundreds of participants on a Saturday morning. Hardly the picture of a town gripped by fear that outside headlines might suggest. That is the actual shape of the contradiction, and it is worth being precise about it rather than resolving it too neatly in either direction. Clonmel genuinely had, and to some extent still has, a documented, organised crime problem serious enough to warrant sustained multi-year Garda operations. That is not something to wave away with civic pride statistics. At the same time, Clonmel is also a genuinely well-run, well-invested, back-to-back tidy towns gold medal town, where the people who actually live there report a strong, positive day-to-day quality of life that has very little overlap with the crime headlines that define how outsiders picture the place. Both of those things are true simultaneously, and that is precisely the contradiction Irish towns have always been better at holding than the headlines writing about them ever managed to be. A place can have a real, documented crime problem tied to a specific criminal network and still be, for the vast majority of its residents on any given ordinary Tuesday, one of the better places in the country to actually live, walk the dog by the river and raise a family. Clonmel is not unique for containing both of those realities. It is unusual only in how clearly and how recently both of them have been documented side by side. €95 million in regeneration and back-to-back gold medals sitting in the same town, in the same years, as a multi-year Garda operation against organised crime. The honest answer to which version of Clonmel is real is the least satisfying but most accurate one available. Both, at the same time, in the same streets. If this look at what actually sits underneath a small Irish town's crime headlines was useful to you, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone from Tipperary who'll have an opinion about this. Let us know in the comments if you've been to Clonmel yourselves.